Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I am about to have the best time of my life. I'm about to make something I learned and I've never actually managed to forget the beautiful flavor in it that I actually insisted that this has to air on the show. Remember, this is one of the many episodes of a part series of this beautiful Christmas season where we're going to be showing you a little bit of the beautiful grandma recipes that exist in and out of Kenya. And we're actually going to be doing it so simple that you're all going to actually want to try it at home. So without further ado, I'm just going to jump into it. We're going to be using a bit of vanilla. I'm going to be using some butter as well, unsalted. I'm also using some cream, some water there, a bit of sugar, a bit of milk, and some all-purpose flour. I'm also going to be using some white sugar, a bit of vanilla, a bit of bicarbonate of soda, some salt, some butter again, one piece of egg there, a bit of vanilla essence, and last but not least, some apricot jam. So without further ado, we are going to slide into our break right now, and I'm going to give you your chance to actually grab your pens and papers. And when we come back, we're going to go straight into making this particular dish. So please don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. So as I said, I'm about to have so much fun with this dish. I always remember the flavor of this every time I just see it in a cookbook or it just flashes in front of me on a menu or on the internet. And I think most of you are actually going to enjoy learning this dish. So without further ado, we're just going to go straight into it. So we're going to be needing a few tools in this particular episode, so I'm going to mention them before we continue. You're going to need 1 or 2 whisks. I'm just going to use 2 because I have them at my disposal. Very crucial that you actually also have a sieve because you will actually need to sift some of your dry ingredients. And last but not least, I recommend you use unsalted butter because the recipe calls for a bit of salt. And what happens is you incorporate a bit of if you use salted butter in this particular recipe, then you can actually avoid using the salt because it will overpower and it will actually affect the flavor of the general dish. So as I said, we're going to start off very simply by starting to incorporate some of the ingredients. And to that, I'm going to start off by mixing my wet ingredients. So to that goes in a bit of sugar, a bit of vanilla, a bit of vanilla and a bit of vinegar. And then I'm also going to be cracking 1 whole egg in there. And last but not least, some butter. Now the butter is at room temperature. It might look impossible for you to actually beat this in, but it's actually what the recipe calls for. So please don't melt the butter. Just use it as it is. So very simple as that. And last but not least, our apricot jam. So very simple. First of all, I like to show you how you combine the ingredients. So I'm going to leave that on the side slightly. And secondly, always important that you actually sift your ingredients. So I'm just going to go in with the flour. And I'm just going to use the help of my sieve to achieve that. So always important to sift your flour. Remember, as I always insist, you can be able to see from the cameras there, always a bit of foreign bodies that sit inside your flour. It's always safer to use this particular simple utensil because it actually does what it's supposed to. It actually keeps you from adding anything there that should not be in there. So simple as that. So all my dry ingredients in one bowl, all my wet ingredients in another bowl. And all I'm going to do now is use this whisk. And all I'm going to do is just whip the mixture together. And don't be worried if you actually see those chunks of butter in there. It's actually part of the recipe, so don't freak out and think you made a mistake. It's actually what's supposed to happen. And I'll insist, don't melt the butter and mix it in as well, because what happens is it is going to actually force your jam to actually split. It might actually also be affecting your vinegar, because what happens is vinegar is an acid and butter is actually fat, so you will actually start to form something very, very different to what you're getting now. And it's why I insist use all the ingredients at room temperature, and please do not be tempted to melt your butter or assume that it's supposed to go in melted. So I like to just give my bowl a turn as I continue. Always allows me to kind of incorporate those ingredients a little faster. Right, so this should actually look like a very disturbing mixture when it's done. So this is actually particularly why I said, don't worry about what it looks like, just continue with the recipe as it says. So into that, I'm also going to be just mixing in a bit of flour and the bicarbonate and a bit of salt. So I'm just going to add little by little, and I'm just going to use my whisk to get that mixture . So as I always insist, always try to go little by little. First of all, you actually reduce any chances of forming lumps in your mixture. And second of all, you actually get a more even consistency. So always very crucial, try always to add your mixture little by little, especially if you're not sure of the quantities or if you're not sure of the technique and you haven't done it before. Always saves you quite a bit of effort there. Right, so this should actually just start to constitute into a cake-looking mixture. And you will actually notice the bowl will start to rotate, which means the mixture is now starting to really thicken up. Something I like to do when I get to that particular phase, I just put a towel right underneath the bowl, and this will actually help your bowl from rotating or sliding on your counter. All we're going to do is incorporate the last bit of flour. Right, so you will get to a stage whereby it actually might just start to really get very, very thick, and you might actually have a difficult time getting the mixture to really mix really well together. For that purpose, I always reserve about a tablespoon or two of some regular milk. And this always just helps it to just try and break the mixture down. So always reserve just a bit of room temperature milk. That should actually help you get your consistency back to the texture you're looking for. So as I said, it actually just comes and combines and forms into a very, very beautiful mixture, a very pasty-like mixture, if I can be able to show you. So as you can see, if I lift my whisk, it actually falls really slowly. So that's the particular texture you're looking for, right? So I'm just going to go around the bowl and try and get all the ingredients around the sides right to the center. And very simply, just tap your whisk against the side of the board. That should actually help you to get the excess off the whisk. So very simply, we're now going to transfer that onto a baking tray. Remember very particularly, the oven should be preheated at this particular stage. So mine is now set between 200 and 220 degrees. I've got my both top and bottom element running, and my timer is already on. So I'm just going to first of all get the mixture in there and then calibrate my timer to the time that I need it to set. But very, very crucial. Very important, especially when you're making a Malva pudding. It actually is recommended that you do it in a double boiler. So I'm just going to explain what that is. A double boiler is basically a process whereby you cook something in a container and have that sit in a container as well that has a bit of water. The reason for that is especially if you're baking with ceramic dishes that can easily crack. This particularly helps you to avoid cracking them while they're baking in the oven. And the beauty of it is it actually keeps the temperature of the bowl constant while only allowing the temperature that is in the oven to actually just cook your mixture. So very simply, I first off start by insisting that always use an oven-proof dish like the one I'm using now. And all I did to this is I just greased the inside really generously with a bit of some cold butter. And now this is now ready to just move the mixture into and go into the oven. So I'm just going to grab a spoon and I'll show you a technique of how to actually pour the mixture in. I always insist, don't try and pour the mixture everywhere around your bowl particularly. Just always try and work the mixture down to almost at the edge of the bowl. So always just take a bit of time to get the excess mixture on the sides to just come to one end of the bowl like that. And always just take your time to make sure you don't waste or lose any of that mixture. So very simply, once the mixture is at the end of the bowl like that, all you're going to do is help it pour out. And all you want it to do is pour right in the center of your baking dish without touching the sides. And this should actually allow the mixture to set itself when it goes into the oven, and it will actually allow it to also spread out evenly. So once you got the majority or most of the mixture out of the bowl, you can now just take your time and just work your spoon right around the bowl like that. And with the help of a small spoon, you should actually be able to just cook that in. And that is about it. So as I said, cooking is always about trying to not waste. Try to use every bit of the ingredients that you have or all the mixture that you make. This particularly is important because it is costly to buy these things, and it is actually crucial to not waste. So always just take your time. It's never a rush if you're doing it for yourself. So always take some time. Always try and work really smart, really clean, and it will actually show even when your dish is ready. So simple as that. Something I need to also mention when you're doing the double boiler method, it might be tricky to actually move your dish right from the table to the oven because it now has water in it. I'll show you a trick that I like to use. So very simply, just pull the rack just about a quarter way out of the oven, and once you put your container there, it should be stable. And then all you're going to do is fill it up about halfway with some water. Just to about halfway to that level. And all you're going to do now is move your baking dish into the center of that particular tray. And all you're going to do is slide that back into your oven and now calibrate your timer. And so we're going to be setting that for about 14 to 15 minutes. And we're going to be cooking that at between 180 to 200 degrees. And we're going to check on that a little later. But while that continues, I'm also going to show you something else. So particularly for Malva pudding, it's one of those beautiful puddings that you actually make the sauce on the side, and then you actually come back later and pour it over the dish when it's ready. So I'm just going to allow this to continue simmering on low heat. So I just put a pan on. Always be sure to just give it a wipe to make sure there's nothing in there that could actually have a bit of an aroma or a smell. And then very simply, we're just going to add about 60 milliliters of water. I'm also going to add about 60 grams of sugar. We're also going to add to that about 125 grams of butter. So I'm just going to drop the whole knob in there, and I'm just going to allow that to melt down slowly. And last but not least, a bit of that vanilla essence and some thick cream. So So all that just goes into the pot, and all you're going to do is just let that sit at very low heat and just allow it to boil until it starts to come to a consistency that is workable. And then all you're going to do now is just use your plastic whisk or your metal whisk if you're using a non-stick. If you're not using a non-stick pan, I'm using plastic for particularly this reason. I don't want to ruin my pan or ruin the beautiful lining that's in there. So I use one that might not, but one that shouldn't actually scratch or ruin my pan. So we're going to take a short commercial break, and I'm just going to allow that to continue simmering. And when we come back, we're going to take that out of the oven. You're going to see what it looks like. I'm going to show you how we actually incorporate the sauce with the dish, and I'll just give you a few pointers on how to plate it. So please don't move, please don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back from the short break. I'm just finishing off the sauce that we were actually doing earlier, and as you can see, it's now just thickening. Particularly I'm whisking it just to give it a bit of a lightness to it, and also just to control the temperature, just to make sure it doesn't bubble too quickly and it thickens just evenly without forming any layers of skin on the top. So remember, if you missed out on what we were making, we're actually working on a Malva pudding, and the sauce that's actually on the pan right now is actually the sauce we'll be pouring over it just in a short while. And before we do so, I'm actually now going to pull out the Malva pudding, and I'm going to show you what it looks like. So this has now been baking for 25 minutes at between 180 and 200 degrees. And it's now done, and the sauce is now just bubbly. I'm just going to turn that off. So simply, it is as simple as that. Now, very, very important to take caution when taking this out of the container. So I particularly like to just grab a cloth, and I would set it right on the inside just so that I can be able to actually get a grip of the bowl. And I'll just move that to the side. And the water we can actually just discard. So be careful always just to take a bit of precaution while doing that. Try not cause any harm to yourself as well. So as you can see, our Malva pudding is just beautifully done. If you can be able to look at it well from the cameras there, maybe you can be able to actually see it's just starting to slide off the sides of the container. And now we're just about to go in with the sauce, but one particular thing that is very crucial to do at this stage, I'm just going to set this aside quickly. So one particular thing you want to do at this stage is just create room for that sauce to actually sink into your pudding. So basically all you need to do is simply make some holes with a knife. And basically what this will actually do is this will allow all that beautiful sauce to actually sip right into the Malva pudding. As I mentioned earlier, it is a very traditional pudding, so definitely one of those that you actually might have to enjoy while it's actually soaked in its own sauce. And it's always good to also reserve some on the side just to serve with. But very simply, that is just as easy as I would do it. So I'm just going to use this ladle to just give that sauce just a nice quick check. And as you can see, it's nice and thick. Remember, everything that goes into this particular recipe might not look attractive when it goes in, but it actually just fits in really well. Right, so I'm just going to pour that right over. And you'll start noticing the sauce might actually just start to disappear into the dish. And one particular thing I like to do while that continues is I like to just grab another spoon, and I like to just dig it right on the insides like that and just try and pull it into the center. This actually allows the sauce to quickly rush into underneath the pudding, and just manages to really just start to really soak in there. So basically what you want to do now is just leave that to sit a little bit, and the sauces will actually start to dissolve into it, and it should actually be ready to serve as soon as that. And I always recommend, if you're going to be serving Malva pudding, always have a bit of sauce on the side to go with it at the table. And very also important, always make sure it doesn't go out dry. Remember, it's a moist pudding, so the essence of this particular dish is to actually have it as a very, very moist pudding. So ladies and gentlemen, my work here is done. Simple as that. As I said, very, very common ingredients to use. For instance, jam, and for the jam particularly, you could play around with strawberry jam. You could actually even try around playing with orange marmalade. Just play around and see what flavors really work for you, and whatever really goes best for you, I would say stick with that, because remember, the best tasting dish is the one that actually appeals to you. So from the studios and myself, it has been a pleasure. You have been watching BrandPlus TV, and my name is Chef Andy. The name of the show is Dinner Guide, so do check us out on Facebook. Leave your comments, your inquiries, or any questions that you may have, and we actually are going to enjoy getting back to you. So from the studios and myself, have a lovely season, have a lovely Christmas season. Enjoy your Christmas dishes wherever you are. I hope you're all going to be tempted, or rather at least look forward to try this particular dish. And until the next episode, when I bring you a bit more intrusive ingredients and dishes to come and play with on this particular stage, it has been a pleasure being with you to this moment. So from the studios and myself, thank you very much. Have a lovely evening and enjoy your dinner.